The curious onlookers who had first spotted Hammer Bro Thor finally understood the danger. This battlefield was no place for spectators. It made sense Thor had been so visible. After the Battle of New City, heroes like Hammer Bro Thor, Tony Stark, and Steve Rogers had become household names on Blue Star. Hammer Bro Thor in particular drew endless curiosity. A mythic Asgardian who had actually appeared was irresistible to the public. Thor's duel with Matt Gigith had slipped through rifts in space. Where those rifts converged, helped and focused by Dr. Savoj's instruments, the fight became the epicenter of everything. From the outside, it looked evenly matched. Even with the help of the ether particle, Matt Gigith could not easily overwhelm Hammer Bro Thor. That frustrated Matt to no end. He had a timetable. The 9 great kingdoms, the 9 planets looming in the heavens, were converging, and the window to destroy them would not stay open forever. If he failed now, if the convergence ended, the chance to plunge those realms into eternal night would be gone. The ether particle was powerful, but finite. Without it, he couldn't beat Thor at all. With it, he could push his weakened body far beyond its limits, but the cost was enormous. A body already ravaged by the Infinity Stones could not fully heal. Matt Gigith was willing to pay that price if it meant accomplishing his ultimate goal. Asgardian. Matt Gigith blocked Thor's current strike, his cold eyes locked on the God of Thunder. He'd had enough of a prolonged duel. Let me show you the true power of the ether particle. A fountain of crimson energy erupted from him. It was an order of magnitude stronger than the blast he had used earlier. He could not afford to prolong this fight. The ether particle's power pushed outward in roaring waves, gusting winds and space-shuddering shock. Matt poured everything he had into one crushing assault. Thor swung the Meow Meow hammer, lightning crackling across the head of the weapon to meet the oncoming onslaught. Previously, he had been able to blunt the particle's force. This time, under Matt's all-out release, the ether particle swallowed the lightning's energy and drove forward, unweakened. The impact sent Hammer Bro Thor flying like a meteor. He smashed through roofs and streets as he tore across the city, buildings collapsing in his wake. Matt Gigith watched him disappear from sight and allowed himself a thin, triumphant smile. Now, he believed, nothing stood between him and his mission. High above, the 9 great kingdoms were drawing nearer, planets and domains faintly revealed against the void. Mist City reeled under the invasion. Reports of an alien ship, Matt Gigith's Ark, had already spread. The invaders did not look like Blue Star people, and the memory of New City's chaos and Ultron's shadow had left the populace tense. Panic rippled through the streets. Why had New City suffered? Why was Mist City next? What made things worse was that Hammer Bro Thor seemed to be the only hero standing in the gap. Where were Hawkeye, Spider-Man, Tony Stark? Could anyone really rely on one Asgardian to stop an entire invasion? Some panicked and fled, others stayed, watching for any sign of reinforcements. The Congress of Eagle Country could not stand idly by. Mist City was part of their domain, and they sent bombers to Ji to back up Thor. But as the aircraft closed in, their signals scrambled. Some bombers veered off, accidentally entering neighboring kingdoms. The planned counterattack evaporated before it began, leaving Eagle Country's officials to pin their hopes on Hammer Bro Thor while they scrambled for other options. News of the invasion spread across Blue Star. Heroes who read the dispatches quickly calculated travel times and concluded there was simply no way to reach Mist City in time. If the invasion expanded across the planet, aid would pour in from every corner. But for now, the emergency was local, and the stakes were clear. There had to be a reason the invaders had targeted Mist City and why Thor stood there alone. Now, no one can stop me. Matt Gigith looked up at the assembling heavens with a triumphant gleam. He spread his arms as if embracing victory. Fountain-like tendrils of ether particle radiated outward from him, each strand a living thing of color and force. This release eclipsed what he had done before. The particle's energy formed a hurricane-like domain that surged toward the converging 9 great kingdoms. Matt did not merely want to destroy the kingdoms with brute force. He intended to inject the ether particle into them and corrupt them from within, plunging them into eternal night. He understood he might kill himself in the process. For him, that sacrifice would be worth it. As the energy swelled, It wrapped around him like a protective field. Approaching him now was the first and most dangerous barrier. Ordinary people could not hope to breach it. Below, the citizens of Mist City watched in growing horror as a dark crimson column of liquid-like energy shot into the sky, a torrent that seemed to splice heaven and earth. Even those who could not sense the particle's true menace felt the color and motion as a premonition of calamity. They recognized, with a sickening certainty, where it had appeared, the place where the dark-skinned invaders had landed. Chapter 127, Shufu Appears. What exactly happened, people murmured. Can Hammerbro Thor really beat those aliens? Is this the end for Mist City? Those in the streets watched in stunned silence. Earlier, the fight between Thor and Matt Gigith had only been glimpsed in the Nine Great Kingdoms' public pavilions. It had sparked curiosity but not panic. Now, dark red strands of ether particle energy were scattering like a vast, twisted rainbow bridge, pouring outward and swallowing the skyline. Seeing that, everyone felt dread. Could this be Mist City's doomsday? After Hammerbro Thor was knocked down, Jenny Fissler rushed to where he lay. Thor was on the ground, unconscious from the blow Matt Gigith had landed. Jenny knelt and shook him. Thor, don't you scare me." Thor blinked, embarrassed and slow to gather himself. Jenny had only seen him like this once before, when he first arrived on Blue Star. Normally, his combat strength was terrifying. He was one of the few Avengers who had stood up to Thanos several times over. "Jenny." Thor's voice came back ragged as he returned to consciousness. "Are you all right?" she cried. "I'm fine." He forced himself up, and his gaze caught the spreading beam of ether particle energy. The ribbons of light arced outward like the Bifrost itself, ferrying dread into distant kingdoms. "This isn't good." Thor pushed himself to his feet with effort. "Jenny, I'm going to stop Malekith." "You're hurt. How can you fight him?" Jenny grabbed his arm, panic in her voice. "This is my doing. I have to fix it." Thor drew a long breath. "I'm going with you." Jenny's eyes were steady. "Jenny, you stay here. I'll feel better knowing you're safe." Thor tried the same insistence he always did. "I won't join the fight," Jenny said. "I'll watch from a safe zone." Thor studied her, as if finally understanding the stubbornness in her stance. "All right, then stay put." His face changed mid-sentence. "What is it?" Jenny asked. "Another master has arrived." "Another master?" Jenny's core trembled. "Thor, could it be Brother Su?" Only someone of immense power could be called a master by Thor. Besides Su Fu, whom they had already warned about, who else could appear here? Thor shook his head. "I don't know. Come on, let's go see." The presence Thor felt was not Matt Gigith's. It felt different. If it was Shu Fu, that explained a lot. If it wasn't, then they were risking something else entirely. They moved toward the center of the disturbance, toward Matt Gigith, who stood enthroned in the middle of the swelling ether particle streams. He was radiating with triumph. "Soon, the 9 great kingdoms will be plunged into eternal night," Matt intoned, letting the reality stone's power sweep outward. His eyes gleamed with the fulfillment of a millennia-old longing. His clan's plan was finally reaching its climax. With the ether particle permitted to spread, all he needed was himself as the final catalyst to complete the activation. Then the 9 great kingdoms would fall, and Blue Star would not be spared. A narrow voice cut through the roar of power, cool and amused. "Sorry, I can't let the 9 great kingdoms go dark. Why did you have to drag Blue Star into this? Are you planning to make Asgard your next fishing spot?" The remark lodged in Matt like an arrow. Surrounded by the ether particle's dark glow, he still heard the voice as if it spoke directly inside his head. "Who's there?" he snapped. "Oh, I'm right over here. You just can't see me." The voice sounded light, almost bored. "Why don't you go take back your ugly little black toys and head home? You've ruined someone's afternoon." Matt's expression went cold. "If you think you can stop me, come and try. If you really want that, then fine, watch this." Before Matt could reply, the ether particle field shuddered. A new force, precise and clean, started to choke the Reality Stone's influence. In an instant, a silver-white light, threaded with emerald green, cleaved through the crimson haze. Shufu arrived. A man flashed into being with superhuman speed, his motion sharpened by a Green Lantern blessing. Even in the maelstrom, his arrival looked effortless and almost casual, as if he'd merely taken a step across town from his fishing pond. For a moment, he simply stood and took in the scene. the staggering, devouring ether particle energy, and at its heart, Matt Gagaith. Shufu's eyes flickered with a golden light. He had only just heard a fragment of the threat and a bit of the banter, but it was enough. The ether particle was no ordinary energy. Under Matt's modulation, it rolled magnificently outward, precisely as intended. Matt had not mastered it. He had been the trigger, the starting hand. He'd been coaxing the reality stone's energy, letting it spread. At the decisive instant, he planned to use himself as the fulcrum to fully activate it. That self-sacrifice would complete the ritual to cast eternal darkness over the 9 great kingdoms. "This is ether particle," Shufu murmured, more to himself than anyone. He watched Matt in the center with a cool, appraising gaze. The earlier taunting voice had been a test, perhaps a deliberate distraction. If Matt was the one Malekith was relying on, if this was the hand the Dark Lord was playing, then the showy threats were just that, show. Loud and grandiose, but a paper tiger when seen without the mask. Shufu smiled without humor. He had come here quickly, not because his portals would struggle to cross a planet, but because even his galaxy-spanning means needed to bow slightly to a field powered by an infinity stone. So he had arrived the old way, fast, direct, and with a little courtesy from a Green Lantern's blessing. Up close, looking at the ether particle writhe and pulse, he knew exactly how dangerous Matt's plan might become if it was allowed to finish. He stepped forward, and for the first time since the maelstrom began, the flow of crimson light hesitated. Chapter 128. If you want to wear a crown, first bear its weight. Shufu had expected this. His deep sleep after striking at the ether particle had been a waiting game, waiting for the particle to reappear. There was no reason to let Malekith keep such an opportunity. As predicted, Malekith refused Shufu's request. "If you want me to subdue you," Shufu said with a smile, "then I will grant your wish." He summoned every advantage at his command. The Silver Superman body, Nabu's power, and the Universe Energy Connection Machine. Every energy channel was coordinated to a razor edge. Shufu's palm shot toward the ether particle, a beam of light threaded with prismatic radiance, and his field enveloped it. The particle trembled under the onslaught. This time it could not hold. To Malekith, standing before him, Shufu was no greater threat than a predatory reptile. Even bearing the reality stone, the ether particle, Malekith could not unleash its true core. Activating the full, original power of an infinity stone was not something a cornered elf could accomplish. Break, Shufu clenched his fist. The swirling colors surged and devoured the particle's power. The reaction rocked Mist City. Rainbow light exploded outward as Shufu used his field to forcibly shatter the ether particle. The aftershocks toppled nearby structures and sent monstrous waves rolling up the Thames. When the light faded, the ether particle that had linked to the 9 great kingdoms had crumbled to dust. Shufu absorbed most of the released energy, but the particle's main mass remained lodged in Malekith's chest. For the first time, Malekith showed genuine worry. He felt the ether particle's tremor and watched with disbelief as the Blue Star human had nearly destroyed its domain field. He had poured everything into activating the reality stone, willing to sacrifice his own life to force its power. But this young opponent had nearly undone it. Malekith's confidence faltered. He had expected the universe-level artifact to make him invincible, to let him bend reality to his will. Now he wondered about the identity of the man opposite him. He had gathered hurried intelligence on Blue Star, heard of the Avengers, mutagenic groups, and low-key power users, but he had never imagined a single individual could stand against the energy of a fully activated Infinity Stone, let alone someone who looked barely 20. Part of his ignorance was understandable. Malekith had been sealed for millennia and missed much of what had changed. The Celestials had visited Blue Star, planting seeds that gave rise to mutants and Inhumans. His own resurrection had one purpose: find Jennifer Schrader, pierce the Alistair defenses, and extract the ether particle from her body. His scouting had been cursory. Reclusive figures like Shufu, a mysterious master of uncanny skill, were invisible to him. "No, absolutely not," Malekith snarled. He doubled down, driving the ether particle's domain outward again. Dark, corded veins appeared across his skin, his body groaning under the strain. Universe-level artifacts never came without a cost. To wear a crown was to bear its weight. He was clearly at his limit, risking everything to force the stone's power through his failing flesh. Even so, his frantic abuse of the ether particle achieved little. It did not so much as ruffle Shufu. Then, in the next instant, the particle, held against Malekith's chest as a last defense, shattered beneath Shufu's fist. No! Malekith slumped and howled. The white-hot core he had hunted for lifetimes, the stone he had sacrificed so much to seize, was smashed to pieces before his eyes. His long-cherished plan to annihilate the 9-star domains lay in ruins, and he had no answer, no resistance left to offer. The destruction erupted outward in a cataclysmic shockwave that swept away clouds and hurled debris. The initial blast knocked Malekith aside, just enough to spare him from the worst of the fallout. When the wind died and the smoke cleared, Mist City's skies were blue again. Malekith's forces had been obliterated. All those who had followed him into this gambit lay annihilated. He stood amid ruin, stunned. How could this be? How could it be? He whispered, eyes scanning the devastation that erased the certainty he'd felt only moments before. Centuries ago, his kin had failed to destroy the ether particle and had only managed to seal it in a hidden pocket of space on Blue Star. Yet now a single, young stranger had done what they could not. Chapter 129, The Power of a Punch. The city was silent but for the settling dust and the residual hum of released energy. Shufu held his hand where the particle had been. The power he'd absorbed thrummed through him, steady and contained. Around him, the ruins of Malekith's plans smoldered, an empire of arrogance reduced to ash by a single precise strike. Malekith staggered to his knees, eyes fixed on the ruined remnants of the ether particle. Every calculation, every sacrifice that had led him here now seemed meaningless. He had gambled with forces he barely understood, convinced his centuries of cunning and the stone's promise would be enough. Instead, he had been outmatched by a young master who harnessed energies with the calm certainty of someone who knew how to shoulder a crown before he wore it. He looked up at Shufu with something like hatred and awe mixed together, but the man stood ready, unbowed, the power within him barely contained. The balance of this battle had been decided in the span of a heartbeat. A fist had become the fulcrum upon which destiny turned. Matt Gagith carried a nagging premonition that the ether particle had not been truly destroyed. It was, after all, a sacred gem born with the universe, something no ordinary power could easily annihilate. Still, reassembling it would not be quick. Worse, the brief window when the 9-star domains overlapped was about to close. Once that time passed, it would be an endless wait. He, Matt Gagith, could not afford to wait. He had no more time, no more patience. If the overlap ended now, the last hope for his dark elves, centuries, millennia of plans, would shatter in his hands. "It's you! I'm going to kill you," he snarled. Inside the domain, wrapped in the ether particle, the outside world blurred into outlines of light. Matt could not see clearly, yet he recognized the young Blue Star standing across from him, the same mocking expression that had echoed in his mind before. Around them, the ruined plain was empty, except for Thor watching from a cautious distance, a few timid Blue Star onlookers, and the 2 men at the center, Matt Gagith and the swaggering youth who seemed more interested in a spectacle than a battle. Shufu answered without changing his face. "Oh? Weren't you the one who wanted me to move first, to push you into controlling yourself? I'm only doing you the favor. If you hadn't been so helpful, I wouldn't have bothered. You and those coal-black followers of yours can't make me waste my precious fishing time on your little war." "You?" Matt's expression darkened. He felt more insult than outrage. This was the equivalent of being called worthless, of being shamed where his own hands were already bloodied. People from the different star domains had always carried a strange pride. Some thought themselves gods, others demons, and they treated the Blue Star with a mixture of contempt and superiority. Even disheveled and near collapse, Matt's voice bore that same lofty contempt as he replied to the clearly stronger Shufu. "I didn't intend to use this move before the 9-star domains were fully aligned," he said. "But now," his mouth twisted, rage and despair flaring into bitter determination. "To kill you, even if it costs me my life, I will not hesitate. I want you to taste the wrath of a god." He gathered the remaining ether particle. Shufu had shattered it once, but the gem was fluid before full activation. It could reconstitute, slowly, and not without loss. The remaining mass sloshed back together around Matt, depleted but still far more formidable than when he'd been fighting Thor. Previously, he had held back. He had not risked the gem's full force on a duel with Hammerbro Thor. Now, the loss of everything the Dark Elves had worked for, thousands of years of hope, had ignited a fury that left him no restraint. If he could not save his people, he would at least destroy the one who had ruined them. Dark energy erupted from him like a storm. Shadowy shapes twisted and coalesced, rising like black dragons to tear the sky. Shufu, meanwhile, was mentally ticking off small gains from his recent days by the River Thames in Mist City, his casual tally of fishing catches and the little attribute bonuses they'd given him. No treasure had been spectacular, but those small boosts were better than nothing. Better than engaging with an enraged golem of dark energy. "Go to hell!" Matt roared and hurled the ether particle storm with everything he had. Shufu met it with a single, unremarkable left hook. The sky itself seemed to fracture with the impact, but the blow had no outward glitter or flash. It was like an ordinary nail driven into a balloon. The ether particle's grand barrage popped and collapsed in an instant. The energy shockwave dissipated, turning into a scattering of dark motes, and Shufu stood in the center of the wreckage as if nothing had happened. The wild wind of dark power blew up against a faint energy shield around him and split harmlessly away for 2 meters before dissipating, like rats fleeing a cat. Thor and Jennifer Seffler, who was still supporting him, stared in stunned silence. Minutes before, a similar dark wave, one that had even seemed weaker, had sent Thor reeling, Mjolnir and all, forcing him face first into the earth. He still could not stand steady. Jenny steadied him now as he watched, incredulous. Shufu's expression was cool. "Seems you, this so-called god, couldn't handle the power of the Infinity Stones after all. At the end of the day, you're only a mortal body." Matt's remaining strength wavered. The backlash from the ether particle's violent reformation had already started to shred him from within. His skin and armor cracked like glass under pressure. Shufu stepped forward, voice quiet and final. "Then let's finish this." Before Matt could brace himself, Shufu was on him, a movement too quick for the eye, and then a blow so light it hardly registered. It slid cleanly through to Matt's chest. "Blue star," Matt gasped, voice ragged but urgent. "The wish of our race will finally be fulfilled." He smiled with the last of his pride, and then his body disintegrated under Shufu's touch, exploding into a scatter of residue. As Shufu stood over the dissipating remnants, it was obvious Matt had never been on equal footing. The ether particle was not so easily destroyed, far from it. Even now, rebuilt, it took a toll on its bearer. The Infinity Stones were undeniably formidable sacred artifacts. For Shufu, who wielded the universe energy connection machine, the stones were simply another source of energy he needed to collect, and a stark reminder that, powerful as they were, even such relics did not make their holders invincible. A ribbon of green light coalesced in Shufu's palm, forming a luminous hand that closed around the floating ether particle. Wrapped in that verdant grip, the particle contracted until it became a single green gem, the ether particle still swirling within it. After securing the gem, Shufu turned his head and spoke softly. "Thor, Jenny, long time no see." 10 minutes earlier, after Thor had been grievously wounded by Matt Jagath's Reality Stone attack, he had only just recovered when he felt a powerful, unfamiliar aura approaching. He grabbed Jennifer Schrader and flew toward the area where Matt had been battling. During the flight, they noticed the brilliant torrent of light from the ether particle had dissipated. Relief flooded Thor. If that light was gone, the newcomer probably wasn't Matt's reinforcement. "Maybe the sky is clearing," Thor muttered. Jennifer glanced at him and nodded. "Let's go see." They arrived as the final act unfolded. Matt Jagath unleashed a surge of ether particles far greater than before, an assault even more terrifying than the one that had stunned Thor earlier. In the onslaught's center stood a figure they both immediately recognized. "Brother Shu," Thor breathed. Shufu's movements were unmistakable to him, calm, precise, the kind of motion that marked a master. Thor had seen him in New City, in Sokovia. Every meeting had left a lasting impression. Jennifer's memory of Shufu came from the same chaos in New City, but because more time had passed since then, her recognition was fainter. a strong impression rather than full remembrance. Not good, she began, worry tightening her voice. Thor's concerns spiked as Matt's attack built to an overwhelming crescendo. It was the kind of power that had earlier dropped Thor into a daze. But then Thor reminded himself of what he knew of Shufu. The new surge should be nothing to him. Slowly, the knot of dread in Thor's chest loosened. Jennifer was about to voice her fears when Shufu, with an apparently ordinary strike, shattered the pillar of ether light. Jennifer froze, stunned that an attack which had crippled others could be so casually dispatched. This only proved how exceptional Shufu had become. Thor and Jennifer watched as the dark elf, Matt Gegaith, went from combatant to nothing, his form reduced to drifting debris and then gone. Shufu turned to them and said, "Thor, Jenny, it's been a while." "Brother Shu," they both replied at once. "You've grown stronger," Thor added quickly. His respect for Shufu had deepened. Saving Blue Star and defeating Matt Gegaith in a single move only amplified that admiration. Jennifer's respect was no less. Shufu could dispel the Dark Elves with ease. If he wished, he could do the same to Thor. "I might be a little late," Shufu said, glancing at the damage around them. "Brother Shu, this time you saved Blue Star," Thor said. "And the casualties, nothing too great." No one could reproach Shufu for his timing. He hadn't promised a particular hour, only that he would fight the Dark Elves, and he had done exactly that. By killing Matt Gegaith, he shattered the Dark Elves' command and allowed the 9-star domains to return to a state of relative stability. Most of the Nine Realms residents, unaware of the full scope of events, had returned to their lives. How long it would be until the next aggregation, nobody could say. And with the ether particle now secure in Shufu's palm, Thor felt a weight lift from him. Shufu's power had evolved. He'd fused Nabu's power with a high-level source of universe energy, and it made him more formidable than before. "Thor, I'll leave the aftermath here to you," Shufu said. "Don't worry, Brother Shu," Thor replied, nodding. With that, Shufu's figure blurred and vanished as he used a portal's speed to head toward New City. "Is he leaving already?" Jennifer asked, stunned. The way Shufu had arrived, dealt with the threat, and left was almost too effortless. "Yes," Thor said, smiling. "Brother Shu is truly a master." "I'll hand things over to the Eagle Country government," Jennifer said. "They should coordinate the cleanup and the report. And I'm going back to Asgard to tell my father about the Dark Elves," Thor added. "Understood." Jennifer watched him go as Thor vanished in a streak of light. The assault on Mist City ended abruptly. The Eagle Country government soon arrived at the battlefield, and Jennifer gave them a summary of what had happened. The people of Mist City exhaled as the immediate threat receded. Doomsday had not come. Back in New City, in a courtyard house, Shufu returned home by portal after stowing away his fishing rod. Xingguang, from the boys, was already there, having come to find Shufu after hearing the news. Xingguang, who idolized heroes and had wanted to become one himself ever since Shufu had killed the brutal Homelander, could not contain his excitement. "Shufu, did you see? Something huge happened in Mist City. Aliens attacked," Xingguang blurted out. "There are tons of short videos about it now. Hammer Bro Thor was fighting there." "The battle's already over," Shufu said. "Over?" Xingguang stared. "That doesn't make sense. How could it be over so fast? The reports just came out. The alien attack only started recently." He wasn't entirely wrong. The Dark Elves had struck Mist City. Thor had engaged them, and then Shufu had destroyed Matt Gegaith. The whole sequence had taken surprisingly little time. Xingguang had been watching the news feeds before Shufu returned. What surprised him was how quickly Shufu had come back. The British government hadn't even issued a full statement yet. "Check the news again," Shufu said with a small smile. "Look up Mist City." Chapter 132, The Baldhead's Visit. Oh, wait a moment. Starlight returned to the sofa, picked up her laptop, and searched for news about Mist City. A moment later, she frowned. "Indeed, Shufu, there are reports that the blood-red light over Mist City has dissipated. It looks like the British government will soon make an announcement about what happened there." She hadn't expected Shufu's story to be true. Now she stared at him suspiciously. "Shufu, how did you know about this? Have you been out fishing again the past 2 days? You didn't even tell me." Starlight's tone made it clear she wouldn't let him off until he explained. Shufu only smiled. Let's get some coffee first, then I'll tell you everything. He had no desire to hide things from Starlight. In fact, he didn't plan to hide them at all. He just didn't want to turn every outing into a spectacle with crowds following him like some superhero act. He settled on the sofa and began to recount his recent travels, the trip into outer space, the confrontation with Galactus, and the sudden rush to Mist City to deal with an incursion of dark elves. Their plan had been to bomb the 9-star domains. Blue Star was one of their targets. It really happened like that? Starlight was dumbfounded. She had known Sufu was capable, but not to this extent. He'd gone to the legendary void, tangled with a creator god, and then destroyed a dark elf invasion. Shufu, you're insanely powerful. A light flickered in her eyes that only appeared on rare occasions. To Starlight, her new boyfriend was the most powerful being in existence. Shufu gave her a familiar, teasing smile. Of course, I'm your master. Her questions came in a rush. What does Galactus look like? What do the Dark Elves look like? Are they terrifying? Why would they want to bomb the 9 realms? Does this mean you can take me anywhere and we'll cross over instantly? They'd mostly sparred in sports before, more comrades than lovers, so now she was trying to catch up on everything. Shufu, slightly helpless but indulgent, answered as best he could. They'd shared too many fights and near misses to hide things from each other now. Oh, right. Starlight suddenly remembered something. A while ago, Director Fury came by and asked me to tell you he wanted to speak with you. Nick Fury? Shufu chuckled. It didn't surprise him that Fury would drop by. SW Ord had been rebuilt and reorganized, busier than ever, and his movements were hardly a secret. Did he say what it was about? No, he said he wanted to talk to you in person. Starlight shrugged. Probably nothing serious. Let's just... now's not the time. Shufu trailed off. He'd been half hoping to see Fury's glowing eye patch again, but as if on cue, Monday's voice chimed. Beep! Master, there is someone at the door. Of course, the bald head shows up as soon as you mention him, Shufu said, unperturbed. Starlight peered as Monday projected the courtyard. There, unmistakable, stood Nick Fury with his eye patch. Shufu had already sensed Fury's presence. That was why he had reacted so casually. Fury wouldn't have sent underlings. If he came in person, it was a sign of respect and of the seriousness of the visit. Monday, let him in, Shufu ordered. Yes, master, the AI replied. The gate opened, and within minutes, a figure walked into the inner hall. The one-eyed director bowed slightly. Brother Shu, I apologize for the intrusion. Director Fury, Shufu said, smiling. You must have been waiting. Miss Starlight, Fury greeted before following Shufu into the living room. Starlight stayed outside. This was a meeting for the two of them. Shufu sat by the coffee table and motioned for Fury to take the opposite seat. Director, what did you want to discuss? Fury had probably been nearby for some time. If he'd tried to meet Shufu earlier, it might have been a long wait. Shufu had a habit of being off-world at inconvenient moments. Fury produced a photograph from his pocket. In the age since Ultron, some classified materials had returned to paper for security. The photo looked like it had been taken in space. Most of it was black, with only a few distant stars, but in the upper left, a dazzling light glowed, and a human-shaped figure faced an enormous human-like face. According to our intel, this face should be the universe creator god, Galactus, Fury said slowly. That figure over there, the one confronting him, looks a bit familiar to us. Shufu smiled. You've made a lot of progress since remaking SW Ord. Monday, who'd been reluctant to show herself, finally projected a holographic display and bounced into the room, full of attitude. Looking straight at Fury, she teased, Black bald head, you SW Ord people are still hopeless after reorganizing. You couldn't even take a decent picture. All you've got is my master's back, not even a front view. What a waste of his handsome, charming, universally invincible face. Fury bristled at the nickname for a second, then recovered. He knew better than to show irritation. Even when dealing with someone he annoyed, he respected the man's power and position. Monday ignored him and played a video. First came a silver figure riding a white surfboard across the void. In an instant, Shufu had subdued him with a single finger. Then the clip shifted to Shufu's fight with Galactus. At first, Galactus's face filled the screen, as vast as a planet, haughty and imperious. As the battle went on, he became smaller and smaller, until finally he vanished in a puff of smoke. Fury watched the footage without comment, the seriousness in his one eye deepening. Chapter 133, 1% of Power. Where was there even a trace of the bearing of the supreme god of the universe? Did you see that? This is how my master looks when he's noble. Seeing that Xinguang wasn't around, Monday couldn't help himself and flopped down to lick Brother Shu on the recording. Ahem, Monday, be honest. And besides, you didn't kill or capture the Devourer. What are you boasting about? Shu Fu said, suppressing a smile. After a moment's silence, Egghead nodded as if he understood. Thank you, Mr. Shu. He stood up from the sofa. Director Fury, would you like another cup of tea? Mr. Shu, I don't have anything else to do here. Thank you for your hospitality. I should see you out. Shu Fu rose and escorted Egghead toward the outer courtyard. Halfway down the walkway, Egghead stopped. Mr. Shu, do you know about that terrifying discharge of power in New City? That energy could have destroyed the city in an instant. Shu Fu's expression remained calm. Of course I know about that sort of power, he said, lips curling. Director Fury, how would you feel if I told you that was not even 1% of my power? Egghead's expression changed. He stared at Shu Fu. He hadn't expected to hear anything of that magnitude. Director Fury, I'm only joking. Be careful on your way out. It's not exactly safe out there. Shu Fu smiled lightly. As Egghead left, his mind didn't treat Shu Fu's words as a mere joke. There had to be truth hidden in that tease, that the power capable of obliterating New City belonged to Shu Fu. The thought made Egghead more cautious around him. Shu Fu always seemed surrounded by a veil of mist, inscrutable and distant. Fortunately, for now, Shu Fu enjoyed wandering off on his own. Egghead walked to his car and climbed in. Director, how did it go? Danvers asked from the driver's seat. Everything's normal, Egghead replied after taking a deep breath. Everything's normal? Danvers repeated, surprised. Egghead nodded. Yes, let's go home. As you command, sir. Danvers started the engine. Egghead resolved to keep what he'd heard from Shu Fu to himself. Putting such information into Subuord's files felt too dangerous. The Divine Realm, Asgard. In the Great Hall, Thor stood before his father, Woden. Father, I am here to accept whatever punishment you deem fit, Thor said respectfully. He felt he had failed and deserved judgment, yet Woden shook his head. Thor, this is not your fault, Woden said. Because of you, the Dark Elves' threat has been ended. The peoples of the Nine Realms owe you their lives. Father, I was not the only one, Thor protested. Brother Shu did so much as well. If not for his help, we might not have stopped the Dark Elves. Woden waved a hand. We will set that aside for now. As my child, you should accept the throne of Asgard. I have long considered abdicating. You deserve this after your deeds. I don't want to be king of Asgard, Thor answered, taking a slow breath. A king must make choices and balance many things. I don't know how to do that. Even Loki might be better suited. Are you speaking from the heart? Woden asked. Yes, father. Woden looked disappointed but nodded. Very well. He hesitated, then added, You may keep Mjolnir. There's no need to return it. Thank you, father, Thor said, relief and regret mixing in his voice. And the ether particle? Woden asked. That's why I came, Thor said quickly. Brother Shu has the ether particle. I believe it will be safest in his hands. Woden considered this, then nodded. If Shu Fu has it, we need not worry. Thor bowed. Then I will take my leave. As Thor turned to go, Woden watched him go and murmured, You are my pride. It was something he could not say openly, but the sentiment was there. After Thor left, the hall emptied. Woden remained on the throne, scepter in hand. Then something strange caught the eye of the silent room. The figure on the throne shivered and shifted. The man who had been Woden was no longer Woden. Loki stood there now, wearing his father's visage. He had not died in the ruins of the Dark Elves' realm. He had returned from the Dark Realm, taken Woden's place, and assumed his throne. I owe you, Thor, Loki murmured, pupils glowing. But the ether particle is in Shu Fu's palm. That will be difficult. He tapped his scepter against the floor. No one watched the gesture, but plans were already forming. Federal Snow City. A covert experimental facility hummed with activity. Technicians worked around a square containment unit. One by one, they opened the device. Inside lay a stern-faced young man, except one of his arms was metal, gleaming with a cold sheen. An older man watched, his expression unreadable. How is he? What's the status? He asked. Commander, one technician replied, the White Wolf soldier is thawed. He'll be ready for deployment to the front line immediately. Good, very good. The older man's face hardened. The world is growing more unstable by the day. Project Insight is beginning. Stat, another technician said with barely contained excitement. Once our seeker bees are operational, we'll stand at the pinnacle of power. The older man's eyes flashed. He was no ordinary official. He was Alexander Pierce, the former director of SWRD, now a high-ranking member of the Seeker Bees. No one imagined the man who had once led SWRD would be working with such an organization, let alone still holding great influence within it. If Captain America had been there, he would have recognized the man awakening in the chamber. The raised metal arm, the cold expression. This was Bucky Barnes, the White Wolf soldier of the MCU era. The man who had been frozen in time was being brought back into a world that needed soldiers, and the war to come was already being prepared. Chapter 134, A New Fishing Pond, East Dwarf Country, Chiyu County, Jianghu Riverbank, the coordinates to Shufu's newly discovered fishing spot. He'd brought Starlight, who had insisted on coming along, and Monday, who looked a little jealous, then set about baiting and casting. In Mist City last time, he'd caught practically nothing. The only consolation had been the reality stone he'd managed to grab afterward. This time, in a place where people spoke a strange dialect and the local size of things was smaller than usual, Shufu was determined to land a big one. The territory of the little people might be cramped and full of unpleasant surprises, but he refused to believe his luck would stay rotten forever. His last real stroke of fortune had come when he defeated Galactus. Just then, Monday ran up, breathless. She'd received a message from a Maikawa Jianyi. The man claimed he knew Shufu was in East Dwarf Country and sincerely wished to invite him to a special welcome banquet. Maikawa said he was dying and wanted to see Shufu before it was too late. Perhaps he had unfinished business. Wolverine? Shufu's eyes sharpened. Maikawa Jianyi and Wolverine had a long history together. Maikawa had been young and a local official in the East Dwarf Country back then. When the United States dropped a small atomic bomb, Maikawa was reborn with Wolverine's help. That was when Maikawa first saw Wolverine's healing. Later, he followed Wolverine's trail across Blue Star. As Maikawa aged, he grew increasingly concerned about his own mortality. Ordinary people felt time's erosion keenly, so he had long coveted Wolverine's gift, not merely accelerated healing, but the seeming agelessness that accompanied it. To Maikawa, Wolverine's existence was proof time could be beaten. If Shufu read the signs correctly, Maikawa's true aim was probably Wolverine. The private nature of the invitation suggested ulterior motives. Shufu had always kept a low profile. He'd earned the nickname Fishing Big Shot, but anybody powerful enough and obsessed enough with immortality would dig up traces of him. He hadn't hidden his whereabouts deliberately. He'd just moved too quickly for most people to notice. Still, curious investigators, particularly cross-border financiers hunting for longevity and keen on mutants, would certainly pick up threads. All right, Monday, tell Maikawa Jianyi I'll go, Shufu said. Yes, master, Monday replied. Shufu owed Maikawa a debt. The man had once helped him. Besides, Maikawa was reportedly on his last legs now. If Shufu refused an invitation, it might come off as disrespectful. There was also Wolverine to consider. Shufu and Wolverine had been close at the Mutant Academy. If he could avoid a confrontation that endangered Logan, he would. And there was another motive, the Shuxian group. The cabal that had once colluded with Apocalypse and nearly destroyed the Academy could not be left intact. This invitation might be a convenient opportunity to strike a casual blow at them. Chapter 135, Special Invitation, Maple Leaf Country, a remote border town surrounded by uninhabited snowfields. Only one road led in. Fewer people than expected knew that the famous Wolverine, Logan, was hiding out here. Hiding was more accurate than secluding. After Logan personally killed Phoenix Chingale during the White House battle in Federal Snow City, he hadn't slept well. He kept dreaming of himself strangling Chingale. Even though Chingale had begged him at the time, and in some sense had wanted to die, the fact that Logan had killed the woman he had loved tormented him unrelentingly. The guilt ate at him. Logan had other reasons to lie low in Maple Leaf Country. The place had a tenuous connection to his past. One evening, he entered a small izakaya following news that a bear he and a companion had been looking after had been wounded by a trap. The animal wasn't aggressive by nature. From its only fatal wound, Logan knew it had been snared by a cruel trap. Logan went to find the hunter responsible. Inside the izakaya, he found the man, a third-rate hunter who used despicable tricks. While Logan confronted him, a Japanese-looking woman appeared and helped fend off the hunter's cronies. The scuffle left the onlookers terrified. The rough young man and the woman had quickly incapacitated several attackers, who were left with frightening injuries. The woman stepped forward and beckoned Logan to follow her outside. He hesitated, then went. She led him to a waiting car. "Hello, Wolverine Logan. My name is Yukifu. President Maikawa sent me," she said. "Maikawa." Logan's expression tightened. The name tugged at a memory. "Yes. President Maikawa is critically ill now. To thank you, he would like to invite you to the Maikawa estate," Yukifu said, handing Logan a packet of information. As Logan scanned the papers, the memory returned. He had rescued a young Maikawa long ago during those chaotic days in the East Dwarf country. Back then, Maikawa had wanted to repay him. He'd even tried to free Logan when Logan had been imprisoned, but then the small atomic bomb fell and everything changed. Ultimately, it was Logan who had saved Maikawa's life. "So it's that Maikawa," Logan said slowly. "Yes, Mr. Logan," Yukifu replied. "President Maikawa insists he must thank you personally. He says everything he has now is because of you." Logan remembered Maikawa's kindness. "When do we go?" he asked. "We'll rest here tonight and depart for East Dwarf country tomorrow," Yukifu answered. Logan stared out at the dark sky. Yukifu watched him drive, sensing his unease. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "Nothing," Logan said quietly. She let it go. She knew better than to pry. Back in East Dwarf country, an airport shimmered under late light. Shufu stepped off his private jet with starlight at his side. He could have used a portal and arrived instantly, but he preferred to travel conventionally this time. Travel, he believed, was about seeing and enjoying the journey. Besides, he didn't know the exact location of Maikawa's residence. A misplaced teleport would be awkward. At the terminal, several members of the Maikawa family waited. Shufu was considered a distinguished guest, and they were there to receive him. Chapter 136, Deathbed Request. Very few people on Blue Star, perhaps only Maikawa Janyi and a handful of others like him, knew Shufu's true origins and identity. Publicly, though, Shufu's status was already extraordinary. He was an investor in many multinational corporations on Blue Star, not a silent minor shareholder, but a top-level director with large stakes and decisive power on multiple boards. He even held a substantial share in the Maikawa enterprise. In a very real sense, portions of the Maikawa group belonged to him. In this modern world, one could no longer live off a humble trade alone, especially now, with the system growing stingier by the day. Financial independence required influence, not just talent. So Shufu moved in both worlds, the hidden and the corporate. "Mr. Shu." As Shufu stepped off the plane, a young man in a black suit approached and saluted him with visible respect. "Yes." Shufu inclined his head. "President Maikawa cannot come to welcome you personally. He sends his deepest regrets," the young man continued. "That's all right. President Maikawa's health is fragile after all," Shufu replied, unbothered. He suspected Maikawa Jianyi had invited him now because the old man knew his life was ebbing away and wanted to settle affairs. Maikawa had arranged many things for his final days, invitations to specific people, Wolverine Logan among them. "Mr. Shu, Miss Xingguang, let's talk on the way," the sweeted man said, guiding them toward an extra-long luxury car. The Maikawa family was sparing with nothing for a guest of Shufu's caliber. "Xingguang, shall we?" Shufu smiled and led Xingguang into the car. Traveling by private plane was convenient. Few people had that freedom, and Shufu was one of them. As the vehicle sped toward the Maikawa estate, Xingguang peered out the window, surprised. Shufu, East Dwarf country, is very different from the United States. The architecture, the people, the atmosphere, everything smelled of a different culture. East Dwarf country drew heavy influence from the Central Plains. Its customs and mannerisms bore those marks. "There really is a difference," Shufu agreed. "Xingguang, I'll take you to the Central Plains when the time comes." "The Central Plains, that's your hometown, isn't it?" Xingguang's eyes lit with longing. She had been living in the United States for years, and had rarely had the chance to travel to the Central Plains. For Americans, a trip wasn't always about money. Sometimes time and inconvenience stood in the way. Most people didn't cross half the planet for novelty, and vice versa for the people of the Central Plains. Soon the car pulled up to a large, Japanese-style compound. Dozens of young men in suits and dark sunglasses stood at the entrance, many visibly armed. The Maikawa estate did not lack for security. As a famous conglomerate in East Dwarf country and beyond, it attracted attention and envy. With President Maikawa's health failing, various factions in East Dwarf country were already sniffing around for opportunities. If Maikawa Jianyi still held full power, they would not dare make a move. But with his infirmity, calculations changed. When the guards saw the young man in the suit escorting Shufu and Xingguang, they addressed him respectfully. It was clear the young man carried real authority inside the household. Sancho Guang's position in the Maikawa family is unusual, Shufu observed with a smile. You flatter me, Mr. Shu. I owe everything to President Maikawa's favor, Sancho Guang replied graciously. A moment later, Sancho Guang pointed ahead. Mr. Shu, the middle building is the president's medical suite. Xingguang, I'll be quick. Wait in the guest quarters. I'll come find you later, Shufu said. Okay, thank you, Sancho Guang, Xingguang answered, then retreated to the rooms arranged for her. Shufu pushed open the medical suite door and stepped inside. The room was filled with state-of-the-art medical equipment. Suspended platforms, monitoring arrays, and life support devices hummed softly. Maikawa Jianyi lay propped on a stabilized support, the apparatus keeping him aloft and alive. Even from the doorway, Shufu could see the severity of the old man's condition. An array of high-tech measures had been deployed in a desperate attempt to prolong his life. Mr. Shu, Maikawa Jianyi's face brightened with surprising energy. I didn't expect to see you before I die. President Maikawa, you're too modest, Shufu said, smiling. Maikawa's joy at seeing him was palpable. As founder of the Maikawa group, the old man knew Shufu's standing on Blue Star. Having Shufu here meant he could entrust matters that truly mattered. How is your health? Shufu asked, not wanting to linger on cheap flattery. My health. Maikawa Jianyi forced a smile and gestured toward the woman in the room. She was a young, attractive blonde who returned the gesture with professional calm. Something about her presence, the poise, the aura, told Shufu she was no ordinary physician. She was a mutant. Hello, Mr. Shu. I'm honored to meet you, she said. Mr. Maikawa's internal organs are in progressive failure, the mutant doctor explained plainly. He's currently sustained only by mechanical support. How long this can last is uncertain, anywhere from a day to a week perhaps, but it will be difficult to keep it going for much longer. I can't hold on for much longer, Maikawa said, his voice thin. That's why I'm so glad you came. You asked me to come for a reason beyond a farewell, I take it, Shufu said. Maikawa nodded, helpless but resolute. You saw through me, he admitted. I brought you here because I have a request. Do you remember Genlizi? Genlizi? Shufu smiled. Of course I know her. Sunfire Yoshida was a student at our X-Men Academy long ago. His cousin is your granddaughter, Genlizi, isn't she? We've had some contact. She's a very good girl. Maikawa's expression softened at the praise. Compared to his son, Yoshida, he had always favored his granddaughter. Genlizi carried his hopes in ways his son did not. He swallowed, trying to steady himself for the ask he'd been holding on to. So how does this involve Genlizi? Shufu asked. It's like this, Yuan Qianjianyi replied. I intend to hand Maikawa Enterprise over to you, but I'm worried my son Yoshida will resent it. Can you protect Genlizi? In time, Genlizi will turn most of the shares over to you. That's already in my will, Yuan added. You want me to personally protect Genlizi? Shu asked. Yuan met his gaze. Mr. Shu, I know you have many connections in Japan. I believe you can keep Genlizi safe. He repeated the request with quiet insistence. Shufu's look was steady and cold enough to make Yuan feel faintly unnerved by the pressure behind it. No problem, Mr. Maikawa, Shu said. I'll arrange for someone to protect Genlizi. I won't let your son take advantage. Thank you, Mr. Shu, Yuan said gratefully, relaxing a little. You should rest now. Shu smiled and walked out. Yuan said nothing more. The handover had already been arranged in his mind. Do you really think Mr. Rat, Shu will believe you? The blonde woman nearby asked. Ophelia Sarkissian, Madam Viper of Hydra, tilted her head, curiosity and calculation in her eyes. She could produce terrifying venoms and deal death quietly. Her nickname made her connections clear. He will, Yuan replied. My arrangements are reasonable. I just want someone to protect Genlisi until I die. My son Yashida might make trouble, Yuan added. If everything goes smoothly and you're reborn, will the Maikawa assets really go to Mr. Zhu? Ophelia asked. From what Yuan had said, if Shufu protected Genlisi, the Maikawa fortune would largely be handed to him, a tempting proposition for anyone. Yes, Viper, Yuan answered. I wouldn't lie about such an agreement. Besides, Maikawa Group has been struggling lately. Handing it over isn't such a loss. If I can live on, I can rebuild Maikawa from scratch. I believe you can succeed, Ophelia said with a smile. Consider it done. I'll look after what needs looking after. Yuan met her gaze, the plans for his rebirth almost ready. Thank you. I appreciate your help. Ophelia's smile grew strange and cold for a heartbeat. Then softly, almost without warning, she murmured, Then this will be your death. Chapter 137, Reunion of Old Friends. A tatami room in Japan. Wolverine, Logan, sat in the quiet, his eyes distant. He had come because Yuan Qianjianyi had asked him to visit. A farewell, or so it seemed. But Yuan had also offered him something outrageous, an ability to remove Logan's regenerative gift and transfer it to himself, restoring youth. Yuan desperately wanted to regain his vitality, and he was hoping Logan would agree. Logan stared at his hand and thought of Jean Grey, of mistakes that could not be undone. He sighed and stepped outside, feeling the need to walk and clear his head. He hadn't expected to run into an old acquaintance. Shufu? Logan's voice surprised his own hearing. Up ahead, a familiar figure, his once-sometimes student, Shufu, was standing calmly. They hadn't crossed paths in years. Even during the federal Snow City conflict, Shufu had been absent. Teacher Logan, Shufu said, a faint surprise of his own in his tone. I didn't expect to see you here. Logan studied him. I'm here because I once saved Mr. Makawa during World War II. He wanted to thank me and asked me to come. Let's walk and talk, Shufu suggested. Logan, did Mr. Makawa invite you here for that reason only? Is there something else? Logan hesitated. Yuan had hinted he could remove Logan's mutant ability and transfer it. Logan had not mentioned that to anyone. He merely shook his head. That's what he told me. I see. Shu smiled, then fell into a thoughtful silence. You're curious why I'm here too? A little, Logan admitted. It's simple, Shu said. You know I hold shares in various corporations back on Blue Star and have business ties with Mr. Makawa. He learned I had come back to these parts and invited me to meet. Of course I accepted. Logan's frown eased into something like understanding. Shufu's presence in Japan fit what he knew of him, someone with far-reaching interests and influence. Teacher Logan, I'm sorry about Jean Grey, Shu said after a moment, his voice low. He had been calculating the timeline. The reemergence of the Phoenix personality had coincided with the federal Snow City incident, when Jean had died. Logan's face tightened. The memory had been buried, but never healed. I'm still haunted by that moment, he said. I can't forget. Shu regarded him with sympathy. I don't think Teacher Grey ever expected to see you like this, he said quietly. Logan stared at the gathering dusk, helplessness in his posture. The guilt stayed with him. He had kept that night to himself. The screaming, the fire, the impossible decision. Logan, Shu said, meeting his eyes, your ability could help the world in a greater way. Help the world? Logan echoed, as if testing the idea. Yes, Shu repeated. He sounded certain, practical. There are ways your gift could be used beyond what you imagine. Yes, you used to be the kind of person who could save the world, Mr. Shu said, patting Logan on the shoulder. Go back. The X-Men Academy still needs you. All right, Shufu. I'll do my best, Wolverine answered solemnly. Logan walked off. Shufu planned to follow soon after. They had already left the Yuanshan compound and were approaching the Maikawa residence when a small, graceful figure suddenly leaped down from the roof. Shufu barely had time to register the movement before he was already closing the distance. In a few quick steps, he intercepted the jumper, catching her in his arms as she tried to spring back up. Genlisi, he said with a soft smile. Long time no see. I didn't expect you'd become so daring. Father, I want to see Grandpa, Genlisi replied, struggling slightly in his hold. For her, the one person in the family she felt closest to was her grandfather, Yuan Qianjianyi, not her father, Yuanchan Yashida. Zhenlizi's father cared more about control and the company than family ties. Yuanchan Yashida had been furious ever since Jianyi hinted that Zhenlizi might inherit the family business. He was sure he deserved the succession. The company was the product of his efforts, after all, and the idea that his elderly father favored Zhenlizi over him had rankled him for months. He had the resources and influence in the family. Refusing his daughter the right to see her grandfather was another way to assert that power. Zhenlizi, Shufu said quietly, steadying her. You can't see him. Lord Jianji's condition is very fragile right now. Grandpa is my grandfather, she said stubbornly. Why can't I visit him? No, Yashida had snapped from inside earlier. I said no. Zhenlizi flinched at the memory of her father's coldness. Jianyi's preference for her had only driven a deeper wedge between father and daughter. Jianyi hadn't wanted to make waves, he wanted to protect Zhenlizi. Letting her appear to be the heir, even temporarily, was a defensive move. If the son who would inherit the company had power, he might dismantle everything Jianyi had planned. By signaling that Zhenlizi could succeed him, Jianyi hoped to keep her safe. Why would Grandpa do that? Zhenlizi asked now, her voice hollow. I don't want the company. If anything, my father is more suited to run it. He still has the right to choose, Shufu said. That's Jianyi's decision. Zhenlizi shook her head, lost. Then why would he make such an arrangement? It'll only make father angry. What am I supposed to do then? Maybe he's trying to protect you, Shufu offered gently. There are other reasons too, reasons that have to do with your grandfather himself. Protect me? Zhenlizi's eyes clouded. She thought of how lonely the family felt without Jianyi's steady presence. If her grandfather were taken from them, she feared she'd be left utterly alone. She stepped toward the river that ran behind the estate. The current roared and foamed below the embankment. Everything in her felt raw and exposed. Shufu moved with her. Before she could do anything irreversible, his hands steadied her again and spun her to face him. Shufu, she breathed, a mix of relief and embarrassment. I didn't expect to see you. It's me, he said, smiling despite the gravity of the moment. You planning something dramatic this time? What was that rooftop stunt for? Trying to be heroic? Zhenlizi's cheeks flushed. Don't laugh at me. You always were impulsive, Shufu said, softer now. Tell me what's really on your mind. They'd known each other for years. When Shufu was still at the Mutant Academy, unremarkable and unsure about his own future, Zhenlizi would come to visit with her cousin, Sunfire. Her father was a mutant, and her grandfather had long shown an interest in mutants in the academy. They were both East Asian kids who'd gravitated toward one another. Shufu had been precocious, and Zhenlizi the tag-along who kept up with him. But as her family matters grew more complicated, their paths had diverged. I just feel like I'm the only one left in the family, she admitted, voice thin. If Grandpa isn't there, who do I have? Shufu listened, then said, Your grandfather told me he might pass control of Yuanqian Group to you. Zhenlizi shook her head as if to knock the idea away. No, I don't want it. Father should be the one. He's built so much for the company. The choice is still yours, if Jianji trusts you enough, Shufu said. But I understand why you're afraid. If your father gets the company, things might change, maybe not for the better. Zhenlizi's eyes shimmered. She looked suddenly much younger. Shufu, take me to America with you. You said you'd take me someday. He hesitated, then ruffled her hair. We'll talk about that when the time's right. Don't treat me like a child, she protested, trying to sound fierce but failing. I'm older than you. You may be older, but you still call me Shufu brother from time to time, he teased. She swatted at him and couldn't help laughing despite herself. Get some rest, Zhenlizi, Shufu said finally. Everything will seem a little clearer tomorrow. Yes, she whispered, lowering her gaze. Their brief reunion had steadied her more than she expected. When she slipped back into the Maikawa residence, she looked less like someone on the edge and more like someone who might survive whatever storm was coming. Shufu left shortly after and made his way back to where he'd been expected. Xinguang was waiting, arms crossed, impatience written across his face. Shufu, you're late, Xinguang said bluntly. You were talking with Lord Jianyi for over an hour. What took so long? No, it was brief, a last conversation with Yuan Qianjianyi, Shufu said. After that, I ran into two old friends, one of whom you know. Who? Xinguang asked, curiosity lighting her face. Logan, Wolverine, Shufu answered. Wolverine too? Xinguang's eyebrows rose. After the Battle of Federal Snow City, she'd heard Wolverine had left the United States and gone into seclusion somewhere. She hadn't expected him to turn up in East Dwarf country. Why did he come here? She pressed. Shufu chuckled. Logan and Yuan Qianjianyi go back a long way. They met during World War II, and Logan saved Jianyi's life once. This trip, it was like a deathbed reunion. Xinguang's expression turned strange, almost teasing. There was someone else, wasn't there? There was, Shufu said. You won't know her. She's Jianyi's granddaughter. I met her when she was very young. So that's it. Xinguang regarded him with a mischievous glint. Shufu, could she be your childhood sweetheart? What are you talking about? I'm only 15 or 16 now. When I met her, she would have been even younger, Shufu replied, exasperated. All right, get some rest. Something's going to happen tomorrow, Xinguang said. Something? Xinguang only smiled, and soon they were asleep. Shufu and Wolverine had both simply wanted to see Yuan Qianjianyi one last time. According to the attending doctor, Jianyi didn't have long. No one suspected that his apparent decline was a calculated performance, a fake death staged by Jianyi himself. His true aim was to capture Wolverine, harvest Logan's abilities, and thus restore his youth and health. Shufu already recognized the pattern. Shufu was hardly surprised by other signs either. Ophelia, the doctor at Jianyi's bedside, was, according to Shufu's surveillance, a Hydra operative. Why else would such a high-level Hydra official be lingering at Jianyi's side? With Esteward's Project Insight underway, Hydra had been resurfacing, and Alexander Pierce, a senior commander, was quietly laying groundwork of his own. Shufu understood all of this. Part of the reason he'd come to East Dwarf country was to reorganize local forces and bring down the Shohei Association. Now that fate had presented an opportunity, he intended to take it. Had he not come across these developments, he might still be wandering the rivers of Jianghu, and the Shohei Association might have survived intact. As it was, their luck was running out. That night, a decisive event did occur. The Yuan Qian household received the coffin. The news of Yuan Jianyi's death spread like wildfire. The household erupted into motion. Even Yuan Qian Yashida, Jianyi's son, despite a strained relationship with his father, began arranging the funeral. Publicly, he had to. Everyone expected Jianyi's empire to be passed to his son, as Jianyi had only one. For many in the family, it was a sleepless night. Genlizi mourned her grandfather, but under Shufu's gentle comfort, she eventually found some peace and slept. No one knew the truth. Jianyi's body had been quietly transferred elsewhere. Ophelia had taken him to a secret Yuanqian Group research facility in East Dwarf country, an institution founded by Jianyi himself. There, Jianyi's plan to capture Wolverine began to move into motion. Far away in Dongji, in a wealthy Japanese-style compound that served as the Shohei Association's local headquarters, the atmosphere was tense. The compound, even richer than Jianyi's estate, was guarded by men dressed like Ronin, the Shohei's signature cadre. Inside an inner courtyard where lanterns burned bright, an old man with a shriveled face sat in the main seat while a samurai knelt before him. Qi Guangxing-sama, the Yuanqian family, has reported that Yuan Qianjianyi died some time ago, the samurai said with formal respect. Finally, Qi Guangxing murmured, eyes narrowing. Few knew that this withered old man was the infamous head of the Shohei Association. And Shufu is there too? He asked. Yes, he is at the mansion. Qi Guangxing's interest sharpened. If that mysterious fishing prodigy Shufu dies in East Dwarf country, the whole blue star will change. The samurai's face went pale. Qi Guangxing-sama, do you mean to have Shufu killed? Qi Guangxing tapped a finger against the arm of his chair. It just so happens someone's offered payment to eliminate him. What? The samurai's voice trembled. He had not expected anyone to dare challenge Shufu. Make the arrangements, Qi Guangxing commanded. Yes, Qi Guangxing-sama. The samurai bowed and left. Qi Guangxing looked up at the ink-black sky, lips thin. Hydra, he spoke as if the word were a taste with consequence. What game are you playing? It was clear the offer to kill Shufu had come from Hydra. To Qi Guangxing, Hydra's claims of weakness were laughable. Their power was an inherited malignancy and not to be trusted. Whether Hydra's real motive was to flush out opponents or to curry favor by removing a rival, Qi Guangxing didn't care. The Shohei Association already wielded global influence. Adding another victory to their ledger would only strengthen them. What Qi Guangxing did not realize was how close the Shohei's doom lay. Elsewhere in Dongji, not far from the Yuanqian estate, Ophelia, the former attending doctor, stood with a young Western man who wore the look of an American operative. "Pierce wants you to come," the man said quietly. "He asked me to bring you back to the States." Ophelia's lips curled. "Pierce? He's arrogant enough to think Espiord is his kingdom. What could he possibly want from me?" The American's voice stayed calm. "Ophelia, this is precautionary. Pierce's operation is about to go live. What he's planning now affects whether our organization can regain its glory." Ophelia's eyes flashed. Her history with Alexander Pierce, the senior Hydra official within Espiord, had never been friendly. Despite that, she could not ignore his influence. "Tell him not to worry. Once I finish matters here, I'll return to the United States and meet him," she said. "I'll be back in a few days." Though she disliked Pierce, she understood his reach and the role he played in Hydra's larger scheme. The pieces were moving, and every player, Shufu, Wolverine, Ophelia, Hydra, and the Shohei Association, was being pulled into the unfolding trap. Chapter 141, A Storm is Coming. Though the current director of SW-Ord went by the name Bald Luden, he was in fact Alexander Pierce. He held the highest authority within the agency, now elevated to Minister of Forward, a rank even above Nick Fury's. Paradoxically, Estward did not answer to Pierce. The organization had already been thoroughly infiltrated. Hydra operatives were embedded throughout its ranks, and the operation Pierce wanted to see through this time was of tremendous importance to them. Ophelia understood that importance. Officially, she was Yuan Qianjianyi's attending physician, but that did not make her benevolent. She intended to manipulate Yuan Qianjianyi, using her toxins to exert control over him. A dying body would be useless, so she planned to remain close. If Wolverine's healing factor could be transferred into Yuan Qian's body, Ophelia would be the one pulling the strings. Yuan Qianjianyi, greedy for youth and rebirth, hadn't expected such treachery. Or rather, for him, restoration mattered above all else. Other considerations could be shelved for the moment. To Ophelia's surprise, Yuan Qianjianyi seemed to be handing the family business over to Shufu. Shufu, the legendary fisherman among mutants, was a shadowy presence she could not easily read. Ophelia arranged a calculated provocation, even if it involved the president himself, to test the waters. If anything went wrong, she wanted the Shohei Association to be the target, not her. "Understood, Ophelia. I'll make this clear to Pierce-sama," the American said, nodding. He paused before speaking again. "Ophelia, does Shufu currently reside with the Yuanchan family?" "Yes," Ophelia replied. "Pierce also insists that you must not antagonize Shufu," the man continued. "If you provoke him, it could lead to consequences Pierce can't handle." Pierce didn't fully understand Shufu's capabilities on Blue Star. The man was too elusive, too opaque. Internal reports contained only fragments. All the same, Pierce felt a deep aversion to crossing Shufu. He could not explain the instinct, whether it was paranoia or some other unnamed reason, but he was cautious. Pierce's focus differed sharply from Nick Fury's. Where Fury saw Project Insight as a way to identify potential criminals, Pierce saw it as a tool to identify and preempt superhumans, Avengers and the like, who might interfere with Hydra's plans. "Don't worry," Ophelia said, her expression shifting. She'd already begun the test. She and the Shohei Association were colluding. It would be unwise to expose their arrangement now. Several thoughts moved through her mind in quick succession. Shufu and my preparations don't conflict. "Message received," the American said and stood. "I'll return to the United States. Pierce-sama will be waiting for your report." When he left, Ophelia watched his retreating figure. In the slit of shadow between the curtains, a serpentine head peeked out, like the head of a snake. "Shufu?" she murmured, and reached out to touch it with a fingertip. A subtle emotion crossed her face. The next day, the confidential report of Yuan Qianjianyi's death leaked. The news sent shockwaves through the East Dwarf country. The Yuanqian group spanned numerous industries. Its head was a well-known figure. Even in a world of vast fortunes, Stark Industries, Pym Technologies, multinational conglomerates of this size were rare. The announcement of Yuan Qian's death, therefore, rippled beyond national borders. The funeral was arranged quickly and held that same evening. Attendance was limited to those with ties to Yuan Qianjianyi. Shu Fu was there. Wolverine, Logan, was there as well. It was midwinter in the East Dwarf country. The Yuanqian family had taken possession of a large estate for the funeral. Yuanqian Yasta, acting heir and interim president, intended the ceremony to be grand. The funeral would also be the stage for the transfer of corporate power, and Yasta had made clear his determination. He would take control of the Yuanqian group, and he would eliminate anyone who stood in his way. Security was tight. Many guards were supplied by the Shadow Alliance, an organization led by the silver-clad Sanada Hideyoshi. The Shadow Alliance did not rival global groups like the Shohei Association, but it held significant local influence, an influence Yuanqian Jianyi had helped foster. With Yuanqian's backing, Sanada had elevated the Shadow Alliance to one of the East Dwarf country's top societies. Prominent figures from throughout the country filled the venue. Shu Fu had brought Xingguang with him. Wolverine, who had planned only a brief visit, stayed after seeing Yuanqian one last time. Something persuaded him to remain. "Professor Logan, you don't look well," Shu Fu murmured in the corner. There was a faint crimson glint in Shu Fu's pupils, as if he perceived something lying beneath Logan's skin. "Just didn't sleep last night," Logan shrugged, but his thoughts were elsewhere. When he woke that morning, he'd had the image of a person haunting him, an image that tugged at his attention now. His gaze drifted toward a pale, blonde woman across the room. Viper, another of Yuanqian Jianyi's attending physicians. As an attending doctor, she was not part of the first group permitted into the inner hall. "It's nearly our turn," Shu Fu said lightly. "Come, let's pay our respects." When their turn came, Shu Fu led Xingguang into the hall. Logan followed. Shu Fu cupped a stick of incense, bowed, and looked up at the austere black-and-white portrait of Yuanqian Jianyi. A small, unreadable smile touched his lips. Many believed Yuanqian Jianyi had truly died. Few suspected otherwise. But those who knew the old fox understood his fondness for deception. Feigning death could be a perfect way to ensnare Wolverine and see who would take advantage of the chaos around the Yuanqian Empire. Yuanqian would remember every detail. Every move would be noted and stored away. Chapter 142, One Wave After Another. Shu Fu had known from the moment he saw Yuanqian Jianyi's body that the laying-in state was not real. The man had been placed in a suspended animation, not truly dead. He had expected as much. "Looking forward to walking together in the future," Shu Fu said, cupping his hands politely. When the ceremony ended, he led Xingguang out so they could rest in the nearby tea room for a while. Wolverine Logan looked grim. He too felt that something was off, as if a storm were gathering over the venue. Across from them, Zhenlizi moved slowly toward the altar, intent on offering incense. Shu Fu's eyes shifted. "Logan, watch Xingguang," he said quietly. "No problem." Logan's expression hardened. The whole place felt tense, like a held breath. Just as Zhenlizi reached for the long corridor leading to the altar, Shu Fu stepped forward and called to her. "Zhenlizi, wait a moment." She paused. "Shu Fu, what is it?" she asked, surprised. What urgent business could he possibly have? Before Shu Fu could answer, a cold, measured voice cut in from the other side of the hall. "Mr. Shu, let Zhenlizi say goodbye to her grandfather first, and then you can speak with her." The speaker was a middle-aged man with a stern face, Zhenlizi's father, Yashida. He kept a courteous tone, but his eyes were guarded. "Mr. Yashida," Shu Fu replied with a light smile. "Of course I'm not trying to stop Zhenlizi from paying her respects. The problem is, as her father, your behavior just now looked hard to accept." Yashida's face went stony. "Mr. Shu, what are you implying? Today is my father's funeral. Even if your attendance was invited by my father, if you disrupt this ceremony, the Yuanqian group will never let it go." Yashida knew Shu Fu only as an investor with ties to many multinational firms. He did not grasp the full extent of Shu Fu's abilities. He treated Shu Fu with the customary respect a man in Shu's position merited, but he had no reason to fear him. Today's arrangements were about succession of the Maikawa enterprise, a matter Yashida was determined to win. He would not hesitate to clash with Shu Fu if that risked securing the company for himself. Shu Fu's voice grew cool. "Mr. Yashida, It's not me who would disrupt this funeral. If anything, it looks like you arranged for someone to disrupt it. Or are those men planning to open fire in front of everyone? No sooner had Shufu finished than several burly men in tight suits nearby ripped their jackets open, revealing holsters and weapons. They moved fast, very fast, but Sufu moved faster. In a few precise steps, he disabled them, leaving them no chance to pull their triggers. Yoshida's expression shifted in a dozen subtle ways. These men were supposed to be his underlings, planted to eliminate Genlisi. Of course, they had no paper trail linking them to him. That part was calculated. If anyone discovered the truth, the East Dwarf country government would refuse his succession. He needed plausible deniability. Mr. Shu, thank you. You really saved us, Yoshida said aloud, drawing a deep, thankful breath as he feigned shock at Shufu's skill. He kept his composure, masking his involvement and turning the scene into proof that he, too, had been almost a victim. He would not reveal his deeper backup plans. Shufu's stare stayed fixed on Yoshida. These arrangements were yours, to kill Genlisi, he said bluntly. You want the Yuanqian inheritance. Genlisi, close enough to hear, tightened. Hearing Shufu, she found it easier to believe him than her own father. She had noticed the tiny tremor in Yoshida's face at Shufu's question that told her something her eyes otherwise couldn't. Yoshida waved the accusation off. You're exaggerating. How could I do such a thing? Genlisi is my daughter. We should consider other possibilities. Maybe rivals sneaked in. Really? Shufu tilted his head. You're not worried? You just considered the worst case to work out responses, and then... His words had barely left his mouth when the hall erupted in screams. Swarms of men in sunglasses charged into the altar area, brandishing firearms and opening fire on the guests. Genlisi, this is too dangerous. We should leave now, Yoshida urged, instantly protective. No, Genlisi said, shaking her head. I want to stay with Shufu. She stepped to Shufu's side. She no longer trusted the man who had just begged to herd her to safety. She trusted the person who had stood up for her. Yoshida glanced at her, and for the first time, something like fear flickered across his face. He turned and retreated from the altar. Being near Shufu suddenly felt wrong to him, a chill he didn't understand. He left before any more questions could be asked. Shufu, what do we do? Genlisi asked, voice steady despite the chaos. Mr. Shu, it's too dangerous here. We should evacuate, Wolverine Logan said, joining them, with Xinguang at his side. Shufu looked at the upheaval around the altar. The Shadow Alliance, led by Sanada Hidekazu, had begun to mount a defense, but the gunmen's surprise assault and their artillery meant the Alliance was being overwhelmed. Don't worry, Shufu said. Reinforcements are coming. Reinforcements? Logan repeated, incredulous for a moment. Shufu's gaze went to the distance. He had not spent so many days hunting in East Dwarf country for nothing. Soon, a ragged host of youths in odd clothing appeared over the hill, shouldering improvised cannons and heavy weapons. They came roaring in, unleashing a withering counterattack against the gunmen. The balance tipped almost instantly. The sunglasses-clad attackers, taken off guard by the sudden arrival of heavy firepower, were suppressed and thrown back. Logan let out a breath he had been holding. He did not want to take on so much gunfire alone, but with Shufu there, he felt the pressure lift. He had seen Shufu's power in action many times, a godlike force that cut down powerful foes time and again. Compared to that, all the weapons on the island looked feeble. Indeed, the ordinary firearms seemed useless against someone like Shufu. Since Shufu had absorbed the universe-level energy after his encounter involving Galactus, the man's impact resistance, defense, and energy reserves had all leapt forward. Any vulnerability to small arms had been effectively erased. If the Silver Superman had been broken by ordinary weapons after advancement, it would have been a joke, and it wasn't. As the attackers were driven back and chaos reigned, Wolverine Logan's eyes tracked a particular figure, Ophelia, the Viper, and he thought about the changes in his own body. He felt a pull to act. Shufu, Logan said, voice low, I'm going to chase someone. Chapter 143, Target. Shufu? Be on your guard. Mr. Shu nodded once. Wolverine Logan didn't hesitate. He took off after Ophelia. Ophelia watched them go, smiled strangely, and walked away as if she felt no fear of being pursued. Genlisi, Xinguang, get out of here first, Mr. Shu ordered. Okay, Genlisi and Xinguang answered at once. In a situation this dangerous, only Mr. Shu seemed capable of taking charge. Before Mr. Shu could lead them away, a dozen samurai-style warriors charged onto the battlefield from a distance. Whether they met Mr. Shu's people or Mahara Yachida's, they slaughtered whoever stood in their way. Their clothing was odd, traditional samurai garb, and the implication was chilling. Mr. Shu's eyes flashed cold. He hadn't expected so many complications during the sacrifice. Mahara Yachida's attempt on Genlizi was one problem. Another was that someone else had come looking for trouble. Judging by their attire, they were likely from the Shohei Association, the very group Mr. Shu had come to find. He hadn't even reached their headquarters, and yet members of the Shohei Association had come here to provoke him. Xinguang, Genlizi, hide nearby. I'll be right back, Mr. Shu said, then darted toward the dozen samurai. Shfu, Genlizi started, worry tightening her voice. Those samurai moved fast. If Mr. Shu engaged them directly, he could get hurt. Don't worry, Mr. Shu is very powerful, Xinguang said, having seen enough of Mr. Shu's recent fights against Galactus and other experts to trust his strength. Yes, don't worry about me, said a familiar voice. Genlizi's face, which had been tense, suddenly stiffened with confusion. She turned and saw Mr. Shu standing beside her. Then she looked forward. Someone who looked exactly like Mr. Shu was walking ahead. There were two of him. Genlizi gaped. It's just my technique, a magic clone, the nearby Mr. Hao. Shu said casually. Yes, Genlizi, it's one of Mr. Shu's tricks, Xinguang added. She'd been startled when she first saw this before, but over time she'd grown used to his strange abilities. Genlizi relaxed a little. Knowing Mr. Shu could clone himself eased her fear. Up on the roof, Sanada Hidekazu watched everything unfold. He'd been assigned to supervise Yuan Qianzhenyi's sacrificial ceremony and to ensure no accidents occurred. Even though most guests would never dare interfere with a ritual tied to Yuan Qianzhenyi, he had to plan for the unexpected, and now the unexpected had arrived. Outside and inside the sacrificial hall, intruders suddenly pulled firearms and opened fire on the guests. These attackers had been arranged by Mahara Yachida. He wanted Genlizi dead, but preferred to make it look like a different kind of attack. Sanada drew his bow and began picking off assailants from above, while his Shadow Alliance troops engaged them below. Protecting the guests, and especially Genlizi, at Yuan Qianzhenyi's request, was his top priority. Even so, the Shadow Alliance couldn't withstand the relentless onslaught forever. Fighting spread into the inner hall, to the resting area where Mr. Shu and the others had been moments before. Sanada realized he needed to get Mr. Shu and Genlizi out of there quickly. More figures were approaching. They wore strange clothes bearing a fierce emblem, a serpent-like creature. Red Jiaolong, Sanada muttered. The Red Jiaolong, or Red Serpent Group, was a recent but notorious force in the East Dwarf country's underworld. Though newer than the Shohei Association, they were just as dangerous, rumored to have powerful backers and equipped with high-tech weapons and sinister hidden arms. A few of them could easily take on dozens. They rarely attacked openly, which made their appearance here all the more alarming. Sanada desperately hoped their target wasn't the same as the intruders inside. If it was, the Shadow Alliance would be completely outmatched. Relief washed over him when it became clear the Red Jiaolong's target was indeed the intruders. Though he didn't know their motives, their intervention helped even the odds. As the battle dragged on, the Shadow Alliance and the Red Jiaolong gradually eliminated the attackers Mahara Yachida had sent. Then another group arrived, clad in those same samurai outfits. Sanada's expression hardened. Shohei Association. Sanada had never had a good impression of the Shohei Association. They were notorious in the East Dwarf country, and now his worst fears were confirmed. Shohei operatives were hacking his men to pieces without mercy. What worried him more was the strange way bullets seemed to do nothing to them. Shots that should have cut them down bounced off as if they were phantoms. With a few precise strokes of the kunai clutched in their hands, they slaughtered his men. Damn it, Sanada swore. He was about to charge down and join the fight when he saw Mr. Shu rush toward the Shohei operatives. Mr. Shu? Sanada was stunned. Everyone at the ceremony knew who Mr. Shu was, the guest specially invited by Yuan Qianzhenyi. Seeing him sprint into the fray made Sanada think Mr. Shu wasn't reckless. He must have abilities to match his confidence. Sure enough, Mr. Shu moved almost casually and crippled the Shohei intruders. The way he did it was odd, efficient, and strange in equal measure. When the dust settled, it was clear the Shohei Association's target had been Mr. Shu all along, exactly as he had suspected. Chapter 144, The Truth Behind the Scenes. The Shohei Association had come this time because of him. A few days earlier, Ophelia had struck a deal with the Shohei Association, and she had paid a steep price for it. She'd been curious about Shufu. Why did Yuanchan Jianyi seem to fear him so much? Yuanchan Jianyi wasn't especially powerful, and Shufu had never used force against him. So where did that reverence come from? Curiosity had driven Ophelia to act. Pierce had later sent advice, but Ophelia hadn't taken it too seriously. Even if Shufu was strong and had somehow survived the Shohei Association's attention, his target would surely be the association, and not her. To learn her secrets, he would have to break into the association's headquarters to find a report like that. The Shohei 837 Association had existed nearly a century. How could she, in her heart, really imagine it being destroyed? No matter who Shufu was, she didn't think it could happen. She had no idea she had already provoked one of the most terrifying forces on Blue Star. Over a dozen Shohei warriors surrounded Shufu. The Shadow Alliance agents had been cut down by those samurai almost instantly. Seeing that, Shufu moved to meet them. The Shohei men lit up, confident. They hadn't expected their prey to meet them head-on. "Looking for death," one of them muttered. The samurai figures moved and blurred, then suddenly vanished before Shufu's eyes. "Samurai?" Shufu smiled. These samurai from the Eastern Dwarf country used tactics and technology, not overwhelming inner power. Their equipment was potent, but compared to Shufu, it was on a different plane. Many of his abilities ignored defense entirely. Aside from his Zanpakuto skill, Mirror Flower, Water Moon, his powers were godlike, sweeping, devastating techniques. And he also had the Superman body upgraded to silver. That was why, when Maihara Yachida's men had fired on the temple earlier, Shufu hadn't responded. It had been a Maikawa family affair. His priority was protecting Maikawa Genlizi, and frankly, the attackers felt beneath him. But these Shohei fools had come for trouble first, and Shufu intended to settle both past and present scores. "They're just illusions," he thought. Shufu struck silently. With a boom, a samurai appeared where there had been no one. He staggered back, clutching his chest. Before he could react, Shufu snatched the wakizashi from his waist and slashed his belly. The samurai doubled over and collapsed. "A fitting end for you. Next!" Another samurai lunged. He pushed a shuriken into his palm and drove it forward. The warrior's eyes widened. His blade passed right through what he thought was flesh. "This is what you call a jin," he gasped. Shufu's body became a sphere of green light. The shuriken thudded into empty air. A second later, a gaping hole opened in the samurai's stomach. "Your moves are outdated." The shuriken still spun in Shufu's palm and flew on, embedding itself in a wooden pier. A terrible wail echoed as a black tide of blood gushed from the wood, and the pier dissolved. There had been another samurai there, planning to attack. Now the shuriken had pierced through his heavenly spirit cover from behind. He had no chance. One by one, the Shohei warriors fell with cries. They were cannon fodder to Shufu. He used only basic physical techniques. There was no need to unleash his most powerful abilities on them. In minutes, the dozen or so elite members sent by Mahara were dead. Only one Shohei member remained. He must have been someone of rank. When he saw the tide had turned, he fled. He had never expected a seemingly inconspicuous mutant student to possess such dazzling magic. Shufu wasn't a simple mutant. He could wield a variety of awe-inspiring techniques. Shinpei Shuichiro watched, stunned. He had always thought Shufu a wealthy second-generation playboy, not someone capable of slaughtering a dozen Shohei elites. From Shinpei's perspective, facing that many Shohei warriors would have been nearly impossible. These were not ordinary samurai. They were the association's best. That their core had been wiped out in an instant suggested how seriously the association had taken Shufu. But none of it mattered now. Those important men were dead. Shufu, meanwhile, felt vindicated. The hostility between him and the Shohei Association had roots deep in his past life. As someone who'd been a Donghua person for 2 lifetimes, he resented the group's long record of crime in that era. There was also Psylocke's death. Later evidence strongly suggested the association had a hand in it. Although Shufu hadn't actually met Psylocke in the hospital, she had been an unspoken idol of his previous life, and he had sworn vengeance. During the X-Men Academy's later turmoil, the association had stabbed their knives in the dark more than once. But by all appearances, Shufu had only been a reclusive student at the academy who never graduated. He'd suddenly re-emerged in recent years and wandered everywhere, hard to pin down. There should have been little reason for a collision on this scale. And yet here they were. Chapter 145, Chasing the Remaining Bandits. Shufu sent his magic clone after the fleeing association member, then returned to the hall with Xinguang and Zhenlizi. The attackers Yasta had arranged were almost all dead, only a few remained. They discarded their helmets and armor and were beginning to surrender. The situation was coming under control. The Red Serpent Group assembled as well, preparing to withdraw. Friends of the Red Serpent Group, thank you for your help, Shinpei Shuichiro said to their commander. The commander looked back at him calmly. We were following orders to support you. Shinpei hesitated, curiosity burning. Can you reveal who ordered the attack? He asked. He had to know who was behind this. If the Red Serpent Group hadn't shown up, even more people might have died at that funeral. Zhenlizi might have died there as well. Shinpei Shuichiro allowed himself a brief, bitter thought. Perhaps Shufu's power would save Zhenlizi yet. Sorry, General Commander of the Shadow Alliance, the Red Serpent Commander said, bowing slightly. The commander hesitated for a moment, then caught someone else's eye. The look they exchanged was almost deferential. Let's go, he said, and led his men away. Their mission here was done. Shinpei watched them leave with a strange mix of disappointment and curiosity. The Red Serpent Group, an odd faction from the East Dwarf country, had arrived for reasons he couldn't fathom. He had no way of knowing what they wanted. When he turned his gaze back, his eyes narrowed. There was someone he did not expect to see. Mr. Shu, weren't you chasing that man? Shinpei asked, surprised to find Shufu standing nearby, Zhenlizi and Xinguang at his side. Mr. Shinpei, you must be mistaken, Shufu replied with a casual smile. Shinpei stared, dumbfounded. Dongji, a remote, wine-swept place. A Shohei Association operative raced here, but deliberately did not head for the association's hidden base. A bad feeling gnawed at him, an instinct he'd learned to trust. He hadn't seen anyone, but something had been tugging at him for a long time, a premonition that had helped him avoid danger more than once. Now the feeling was absolute and bleak. Death, inevitable. Damn it. He stopped, jaw tight. Could this be the end of the road? Would he die here? If he was going down, he wasn't going quietly. If I have to die, I'll take them all with me. The operative's eyes flashed with a hard, terrible light. He scanned a nearby courtyard, clenched his fists, and went inside. He had prepared for this eventuality. Ways to leave no survivors if his premonition didn't lift. He would not risk bringing disaster back to the Shohei Association. Everything he'd seen recently kept replaying in his head. Shufu's terrifying power, the Red Serpent Group's sudden appearance. Eliminating Shufu had been a priority for many in the association, and even if Shufu himself had been neutralized, they'd assumed the threat would be contained. But the Red Serpent Group was different. They hadn't been around long, but their methods were advanced, their reach peculiar. They used techniques no one in the market could imagine, and nobody knew how. In some other timeline, the Red Serpent Group had existed in the original Marvel universe and followed a similar path. Shufu had access to fragments of that history, and after the East Dwarf country's tinkering, he deliberately, or not, accelerated that process. Reverse engineering X-gene inhibitors, super god water, and other exotic materials, and then diluting them among ordinary people was like handing out miracles. In recent days, Shu had been making arrangements and contacting the powers he would need to mobilize. The East Dwarf country had only been one piece of it. What exactly was going on? His pupils narrowed. Had they picked a fight with someone they shouldn't have? Bits of information he had collected about Shufu suggested a terrifying possibility. If anyone in the world could combine and develop extraordinary abilities the way the Red Serpent Group had, it was likely that Shufu was behind it. The idea hit him cold. The Shohei Association had made a mistake. They'd angered someone far beyond their expectations. Have a drink and be on your way. A voice called from inside the house, cutting through the operative's spiraling thoughts. The sound chilled him. This was his safe house. No one knew about it. With his training, he would have sensed anyone inside if they were human. He had sensed nothing, and yet there was a voice. He rose and fixed his eyes on a window. When his gaze landed on the figure inside, they shrank in disbelief. It was Shu Fu. "Oh," Shu said, smiling as if he'd expected them to have his dossier already. He set 2 cans of Coke on the sill and pushed one toward the man. "No sake? Fine. Drink this." The operative forced himself to sit. He had to admit it. He had underestimated Shu Fu. People thought him a spoiled second-generation kid riding his professor's coattails at the X-Men Academy. None of them imagined Shu Fu might be a mastermind. "Mr. Shu," the operative said at last, "I don't have a personal grudge against the Shohei Association. Why are you trying to kill me?" Shu studied him for a moment. "Why did you come here?" he asked. "I can't say." The operative replied. "The Shohei Association has strict rules." Shu's expression hardened. "Is that so? Then what is your plan?" The operative's voice tightened. "Before I die, I want to ask one thing. Tell me, are the Red Serpent Group yours?" Shu laughed softly. "Very perceptive. Yes, the Red Serpent Group is one of my powers." The man's face fell. "We made a mistake," he murmured. Then, with a sudden, hateful flash in his eyes, he raised his chin and stared at Shu. "If that's true, then we'll die together for the Shohei Association." Bang! The building shook. The operative had buried charges throughout the room. He had never wanted to use them, but the premonition had not lifted. He had no choice. Red light blossomed as the explosives detonated, and the courtyard began to buckle. He watched for the look of fear on Shu's face, a small, savage satisfaction that even the most formidable power would be reduced to nothing by the blast. Shu did not flinch. He smiled. "Susanoo." A layer of pale blue energy erupted, folding over Sufu and the Shohei operative, swallowing the shockwave as if it were nothing. Chapter 147. Time is running out. The terrifying force of the explosion engulfed them both in an instant. Bang! 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 A buried landmine array discharged in relentless succession. The building, which moments before had seemed intact, was shattered into countless fragments by the blast. Anything inside was twisted, broken, and seared by the impact and the heat. The shock cracked the nearby ground, and people at a distance screamed and trembled. This was no ordinary accident. The continuous, overwhelming surge of energy sent the surrounding residents into a panic. Amid the blinding light, a verdant glow enveloped a small pocket of space. Everything around it had been ravaged by the blast, but inside the green halo, a table, 2 chairs, 2 glasses of water, and 2 people remained untouched. "Just who are you?" the samurai of the Shohei Association asked, visibly shaken. Such a bombardment had failed to harm Shufu. Through the green light, flames flickered and licked at the barrier, but the pale shield held firm. In other words, the full force of the explosives couldn't even crack that thin defense. "I've told you before," Shufu said quietly. "I'm still a student, but I'm no ordinary one." "Then why are you protecting me?" the samurai demanded. Shufu hadn't only protected himself, he'd also put up that defensive power around the samurai. The man wanted to know who was targeting him and whether Shufu knew anything about the secrets of Hydra. Perhaps Shufu could be persuaded to talk. Shufu's eyes fixed on the samurai, and he smiled. The samurai's face hardened. "There's no way I'll tell you anything," he said coldly. He had no hope of survival, so he would not betray the Shohei Association. The Shufu before him was no ordinary mutant. The Red Serpent was Shufu's power, a sign that Shufu could challenge the Shohei Association. Though arrogant about his organization's strength, the samurai felt the threat Shufu posed, and it was a serious one. "Is that so?" Shufu studied the samurai's rigid features, and knowing it would be useless to try to get answers through torture, changed tack. "Don't worry, you will tell me," he said. He set the cup in his hand on the table and looked straight at the man. A beam of white light burst from Shufu's eyes, dazzling, alive, seeking entrance into the samurai's skull. It was the signature of mental invasion, exactly like Professor X's technique. The samurai seemed to blank out the moment the prismatic light struck him. Bang! The house convulsed again. The entire structure collapsed, and fissures spidered across the nearby ground. After that prolonged onslaught of energy, the blast finally began to die away. The TFD of East Dwarf Country arrived on the scene during the aftermath. They examined the wreckage and exchanged worried looks. This was not the result of a water leak. Only a multitude of bombs could have produced such devastation. The TFD quickly called the East Dwarf Country police. When the police arrived, they were stunned. As specialists, they could estimate how many explosives had been involved. They searched the ruins and found the remains of a person, but the body was no longer even recognizably human, oddly preserved despite the blast. That body could only be the samurai's. Given the location had been the Shohei Association warriors' private hideout, the officers found no further clues. The samurai had left no records and no traces. With no leads, the investigators left, helpless. The bombing became an unsolved case. Yuanqian Group, Villa District. Shufu escorted Xingguang and Zhenlizi back to the estate. Zhenlizi had been reluctant to stay here. After what had happened at the funeral, she suspected her father, Maihara Yachida, had been involved. The odds were high that staying would be dangerous. But with Shufu present, she felt less troubled. She had seen Shufu kill the Shohei Association samurai. It had been bloody, but as a member of the Yuanqian family, she didn't consider it wrong. After all, those Shohei members had tried to kill Shufu first. Shufu, will it be a problem if another one of you goes after that samurai? Zhenlizi asked. The question sounded odd, but she meant to know if an avatar or clone of Shufu could handle any remaining threats. It's fine, Shufu replied, shaking his head. They can't threaten me. With his current power, even a magic projection of himself would be more than a match for that samurai. Only opponents at Odin's level would give him trouble, and there was no reason to believe the Shohei Association had anyone that powerful. After all, Odin is the god king of the 9 realms. In a reality where creator gods and supreme beings are absent, very few can contend with him at his peak. That's good, Zhenlizi said, relieved. Xingguang smiled in agreement. He knew Shufu better than most. Someone who could stand up to the supreme creator god Galactus was not to be trifled with. The samurai had been outmatched from the start. There was a knock at the door. Come in, Shufu called. The door opened and Yukifu stepped into the room. She was the woman who had brought Wolverine over from Canada. She and Zhenlizi had grown up together. Though a servant of the Yuanqian family, Yukifu cared deeply for Zhenlizi and had no wish to see her harmed. Mr. Shu, Miss Xingguang, Miss Zhenlizi. Chong Shushu began, then hesitated. He glanced toward Yukifu. Yukifu. Shufu nodded to the woman. He had met Yukifu before, though their relationship was not as close as Zhenlizi's. In truth, he hadn't spent much time with Zhenlizi either. Yukifu, is something wrong? Zhenlizi asked. She'd noticed Yukifu's hesitation. Miss Zhenlizi, it's really dangerous for you to stay here, Yukifu said respectfully. You know, this time's disturbance. Maikawa. Yukifu trailed off. Zhenlizi's face hardened. You mean my father? She said bitterly. You think this was his doing? Surprised, Yukifu looked up. Miss, how did you know? It's nothing, Zhenlizi said. Shufu told me before. When he tested my father's expression was already wrong. If that's true, then all the more reason for you to leave, Yukifu said, worry plain on her face. Lord Yasta is here now. If I was only guessing before, I'm sure now. Maihara Yasta won't give up easily. You're worrying too much, Shufu said lightly. I'll protect Zhenlizi. Those past 2 days had left Zhenlizi with a strange, unshakable confidence in Shufu. She believed him. By the way, Shufu added, they say you can see a person's death. You didn't see Zhenlizi's death, did you? Yukifu hesitated, then shook her head blankly. In front of Shufu, she really had never seen a death aura. That was more than odd. Everyone's life must end. There should be a trace, an aura that marks mortality. Even other causes, powerful attacks by an expert, would normally leave such signs. But on Shufu, there was nothing. It was as if he could not die. The idea astonished her. Mr. Shu, Yukifu said finally, I can't see any death aura on you. Then don't worry, Shufu laughed. Stay with me and nothing will happen. I understand, Mr. Shu. Yukifu bowed and left the room. Zhenlizi, Xingguang, why don't we take a walk outside? Shufu suggested. The day was still young. A walk might help Zhenlizi clear her head. Okay. Zhenlizi nodded. I don't mind, Xingguang said. Shufu led them out of the Maikawa residence. Yuanqian practice room. A swordsman in layered protective gear was relentlessly testing the students before him. His shinai struck with such force it toppled several opponents. Then he set the bamboo sword aside, removed his helmet, and revealed a familiar face. Maihara Yasta, Genlizi's father. "What is it?" he asked the attendant standing nearby. "My lord, Mr. Shu has just taken Miss Genlizi out of the estate," the attendant reported. "I understand," Maihara Yasta said. "You may go." "Yes, President." The attendant bowed and left. Maihara Yasta opened the door and looked up at the sky, his pupils flashing with cold light. He was furious. His preparations this time had been foiled by the sudden appearance of the Red Serpent group. Thinking back on his conversation with Shufu, Maihara Yasta felt that exchange now carried deeper meaning. Could the Red Serpent group have ties to Shufu? He wondered, pupils narrowing. Because Genlizi was now with Shufu, he had not struck yet, but his patience was dwindling. Time was running out. Wolverine versus Ophelia Wolverine, Logan, went down hard. Streaks of blood marked his body. The wounds did not heal. He had always been able to shrug off grievous injury, but now his regenerative ability was gone, suppressed. "What did you do to me?" Logan rasped, fixing Ophelia with a glare. He remembered something from the morning, something she had done. Ophelia smiled, calm and cold. "I didn't do anything you can't handle," she said. "You aren't as invincible as the legends. Now do you feel you're about to break?" Logan felt the exhaustion coiling through him. He had the sense something had been taken from him. "Sometimes people call me Viper," Ophelia said, trailing a finger along the snake-shaped ornament at her throat, smiling without warmth. With that, she hauled the dizzy Logan into the trunk of a car. Later, Ophelia searched the area and found no trace of him. In their fight, she had managed to suppress Logan's healing and poison him. He had been weakened and should not have been able to hold out. But where Logan had once continued to fight, now he found an opening and fled. If he had been at his peak, she would have feared him. In his present state, though, any prolonged confrontation would have ended badly for him. So he had run. Ophelia cursed under her breath. He was gone. As it happened, the attending physician for Yuan Chanjianyi was a mutant. Chapter 1149, The Truth Behind the Scenes. The situation was stranger than Logan had expected. After searching the place for a while, Ophelia had left. She had things to do and no reason to linger. Not long after she went, a familiar figure slipped into a corner and moved with purpose. It was Logan. The person he most wanted to see now was Shufu. With Shufu's power, Ophelia and her allies couldn't possibly be stronger than Shufu. Besides, the attending physician who had treated Meikawa Jianyi was a mutant. That fact nagged at him. Something didn't add up. When Shufu returned with Xingguang and Genlizi, a private message informed him that Logan had come back badly hurt. Shufu told Xingguang and Genlizi to rest and went straight to the ward. Yukifu was there. She had brought Logan over from Canada and felt responsible for his condition. She had promised Logan that he only needed to come back to see Meikawa Jianyi and then could return to Canada. She hadn't expected him to be attacked in East Dwarf country. "Yukifu, how is he?" Shufu asked, looking down at the unconscious Wolverine. "Mr. Zhu, Logan's self-healing has been weakened," Yukifu replied quickly. "Right now he's like any ordinary man, and there are toxins in his body. It looks like someone targeted him." "It's obvious," Shufu said. "If his healing failed without human interference, that wouldn't make sense." He looked at the unhealed scars on Logan's body. Under normal circumstances, those wounds would have sealed long ago. "Logan shouldn't have enemies here," Yukifu added, her expression darkening. "He hasn't been to East Dwarf country much since decades ago. Who would hold a grudge against him?" "Who would provoke Logan?" Shufu said quietly. It was hard to say. Whoever wanted him harmed might be someone neither of them expected. Yukifu blinked. "Mr. Shu, who could it be?" "Let him recover first," Shufu said. "Do you think you can heal him, Yukifu?" "I'm not a doctor," she answered, "but I know someone who can treat him in this condition." "Who?" "Stephen Conan Nanji," Shufu said. "That man? God of Scalpels?" Yukifu's surprise showed how renowned the name was, even here. Stephen Conan Nanji's reputation as a medical genius preceded him. Shufu nodded. "Yes, if we need help, we should get him." "Can he come now?" Yukifu asked. "We can't do much on our own. First, move Logan to Maikawa's medical room," Shufu decided. "There's better equipment there. Let's see what's wrong." They transferred Logan. With Shufu's power, neutralizing the toxins should be straightforward. The foreign toxins in Logan's bloodstream were nothing for him. Before long, Logan's eyes opened. When he saw Shufu, a flicker of relief passed over his face. "You saved me again," Logan said, feeling the gratitude. "I haven't saved you yet," Shufu replied. "Tell me exactly what happened." Logan thought a moment. "You know I was chasing the attending physician who treated Maikawa Jianyi, right?" "I know. That attending physician is a mutant. She can release toxins. My healing vanished because of what she did." "Do you know why she would do that?" Shufu asked. Logan shook his head. "I didn't even know her before this. I don't know why she'd target me." "We might find out soon," Shufu said. "Now that your healing is suppressed, there's likely some device or mechanism inside you." "A device? It's possible," Shufu said to Yukifu. "Prepare the scanners." Yukifu calibrated the instruments. The readout soon revealed something everyone had feared. There was an anomalous object embedded in Logan's heart. "Is that what's causing my healing to fail?" Logan asked quietly as they watched the screen. "Very likely," Shufu answered. Logan breathed out, a slow, troubled sound. "Shufu, thank you. I'll take it out myself." They all saw what the scan showed. No foreign metal fragments in his bones. His skeleton was still adamantium, but a small, worm-like object had been lodged in his heart. It explained the unexpected suppression of his healing. Logan wanted to operate on himself with his claws. He had done worse and trusted his own instincts. Yukifu hesitated, alarmed, but she yielded to his insistence. Logan's claws opened his chest and extracted the device. It was crude and alien in design. How it had gotten there, none of them yet knew. As soon as it came free, Logan felt his regeneration return. The wounds on his body knit rapidly, skin sealing and tissue repairing in moments. "Mr. Logan, now that you're better, what will you do?" Shufu asked when the worst had passed. "I'll go back," Logan said. "I need to see Maikawa's final moments." He wasn't ready to leave things unresolved with Ophelia. Leaving East Dwarf country wouldn't stop her if she intended something. Whoever had tried to immobilize him might have other plans. Yukifu's shoulders slumped. She felt she had failed him. "Logan, I'll take you back myself tomorrow." "It's late now," she said softly. "This isn't your fault, Yukifu," Logan replied. "Maybe someone's after something." "All right, had a rest, Logan," Shufu said. "I'll go on ahead." "Be careful, too," Logan added. Shufu nodded and left the ward. Night had fallen outside the Yuanqian compound. The winter air cut through the courtyard as Shufu walked with purpose to another place, an Eastern-style compound whose size and luxury rivaled the Yuanqian compound. It was the headquarters of the Shohei Association and the home of their commander, Qi Guangxing. From information gleaned from Shohei Association informants, Shufu had learned a great deal about who had designs on Logan. He intended to deal with the Shohei Association decisively. "Boss, what do we do now?" A group of young men in black, members of the Red Serpent Group, a peculiar underground organization that had recently appeared in East Dwarf country, followed him and asked with respect. Their jackets bore the emblem of a strange creature. "I'll go in first," Shufu said. "Wait half a cup of tea, then come in." "Yes, boss. Master, be careful." The young man's voice trembled with caution. "Don't worry, I'll be careful." Shufu stepped forward and vanished from the young men's sight. One of them narrowed his eyes. He'd seen Shufu disappear without a trace.